hearing is being held to help shine a light on one of the darkest aspects of Russia's bloody and unjustified war in Ukraine. Thousands of Ukrainian children that you've talked about have been kidnapped by Russia since this terrible war began. They've been abducted from their homes. They've been ripped out of their parents' arms. They've been sent, as we heard, to forced re-education programs, military training camps, and worse. The horror of this sort of crime is really hard to fathom, and that is why it resulted in Putin being charged for war crimes by the International Criminal Court, and it is the height of barbarity. So I really appreciate all of the witnesses today joining us and sharing your very powerful testimony and talking about the steps that we can take to secure justice for this ongoing atrocity and provide healing for the victims and survivors. Unfortunately, we simply cannot have this conversation without talking about the fact that, as Ranking Member Schatz just mentioned, earlier this year the Trump administration abruptly cut off funding to help track the victims of Russian kidnapping and deliver justice. And as noted already, that data was almost all lost and delayed in being sent to the proper authorities. That was absolutely senseless. And today there is still no ongoing U.S. funding for this specific work. Now, I wish that we had the Trump administration officials here with us today to explain why that program was terminated and to talk about efforts in this space moving forward. I understand, Mr. Chairman, they were invited, but they're not here today, and that really is inexplicable to me. We have also seen the Trump administration put forward drafts of so-called peace plans that read more like Russian wish lists than a serious plan. We really need better from this administration. We all need to stand firm by our allies in Ukraine, and we need to stand firm for basic principles like accountability and justice, especially for something as fundamentally immoral as kidnapping children, which is why it is critical that we push back against careless cuts like the one I just talked about. We need to reverse course. We need to restore the bipartisan tradition of support for investments that uphold our values and support our allies and strengthen our leadership. And if we want a peace deal to end this war, we have to make sure that Putin understands our resolve to stand by our allies will not waver. War crimes cannot be swept under the rug, and he can't get a better deal by walking away from the table and waiting us out. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm pleased that we're having this hearing today and to be here with so many others who are sending the message in a bipartisan way with our voices, and I hope we can send the same message with our laws, as well as by writing a very strong SFOPS bill that restores funding to help identify, track, and return victims of kidnapping, and restores the support to so many other worthy NGOs that have a long history of good work and bipartisan support, and that maintains robust support to Ukraine at this very critical moment. With that, Mr. Kuleba, wanted to ask you, can you talk a little bit more about the work you do to return Ukraine children to their families and how governmental funding and coordination helps expand your ability to do so?
Thank you so much, Senator. And we built our system beginning from the investigators team who are searching these kids. And then, as I mentioned before, after rescue these kids, we provide rehabilitation, and we can find more information about that kids who stayed in occupied territories. And very often, these kids whose parents were killed or arrested or disappeared, and we have a little limit of time just to extract them from that territory. And we built a holistic system for their research, so their search, rescue, rehabilitation, and reintegration. And we have rehabilitation centers when more than 800 beds in our centers and 6 months rehabilitation program for both for families and children after reunification and for unaccompanied minors and orphans, because many children who've been rescued have draft notice for the Russian army. It's a huge risk. And we have kids who've been rescued from Russian foster families, from Russian military academies, even from the Russian army. And they are witnessing about war crimes, and they testimony how they've been taken, forcibly taken to the Russian army. And it thousands of Ukrainian children who in such risk, and many of them who were taken, forcibly conscripted, and now fighting with us. And that's why it's so important for us to find these kids and rescue them in time. And just last statistics, every 6 captured soldiers who are in our prisons from occupied territories, the young adults who've been Ukrainian children, who've been brainwashed and who've been forcibly conscripted. And they have to fight, they must fight, because if not, they will be jailed or just killed.
I can't even imagine. I mean, what you said in time is really critical, because if you take the pictures you had of 2-year-olds and then 11 years later, that's been their life. They don't remember much else, and rehabilitation must be extremely difficult. So in time is critically important, and why funding, Mr. Chairman, is so important as well. I am out of time, but I did want to ask Mr. Maximov, what is the single greatest obstacle that the United States faces in trying to compel Russia to return these abducted children?
Thank you for the excellent question. The reality is that for the Russians to return the kids, it is the same as testifying into committing a crime. Every single child returned has been a victim of a war crime. They can tell what happened to them. They can tell the law enforcement authorities what happened to the peers of theirs, what happened to their friends, what happened to their family members, what happened in towns they were born from. So that is very counter-instinctive for them to return the witnesses who would testify against them. And another huge obstacle that I think would any effort, any mediated or negotiated effort endure or face is they systematically try to downplay the crime. Despite hundreds and hundreds of names that have been submitted by Ukraine through different channels, from State of Qatar to the Vatican to Istanbul list, there were many of them, various attempts. There have never been a return of 20 kids even. The biggest number, I guess, it was around a dozen, while they have thousands of names. So I think those two things, it goes against the very logic for them to release the witnesses to their crime, and also they would be trying to do everything they can to downplay the scale.
Oh, thank you. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.